I promised you a couple of lectures before that I would explain why there was a factor pi in Coulomb's law. I will fulfill that promise in this lecture, but before that, I will need to introduce to you another quantity called electric flux. Imagine electric field as represented by the red arrows in the simulation is incident onto a surface. Electric flux is then defined by the amount of electric field that penetrates the area of the surface. It is denoted using the capital letter of Greek alphabet phi. So straight away we can see from this definition that electric flux will have to be proportional first to the magnitude of the field. Larger fields, which means more red arrows in this simulation, means larger flux. Second, it is also proportional to the area of the surface. Larger area means larger flux. But who says that the fields must always come perpendicular to the surface? It may come at certain angle relative to the surface. Theta is taken to be the angle between the incident field and the normal direction of the surface. By the way, normal in the context of mathematics or physics means perpendicular. As you can see, the flux will be zero when the incident field is parallel to the surface, that is when the black arrow is perpendicular to the red arrow, or when theta is 90 degrees, and it will be at its maximum when the incident field is perpendicular to the surface, that is when the black arrow is pointing in the same direction as the red arrows, or when theta is zero. But notice that flux could also be negative if the field is coming in from the other side of the surface. The flux reaches its minimum when the black arrow is pointing in the opposite direction to the red arrows, or when theta is 180 degrees. Now there is something interesting here. If you are to rewrite the formula for flux with a slight rearrangement, the term E cosine theta refers to the projection of the incident field along the normal direction of the surface. In other words, only the component of the field perpendicular to the surface contributes to the flux on that surface. Keep this in mind. The SI unit of flux is Weber, or WB in short form. It is named after a 19th century German physicist Wilhelm Weber. If electric flux is proportional to electric field and electric field originates from charge, there should be an equation that relates electric flux to charge. That equation is known as Gauss' law, which states that the net electric flux across a closed surface will be equal to the total charge enclosed by the surface, divided by the permittivity of the medium surrounding the charges. The key word here is the word closed. Only charges enclosed by the surface contribute to the electric flux on that surface. This is best explained through example. Look at these three charges, Q1, Q2, and Q3. Any of them could be positive or negative. And now, I'm going to draw a random surface which encloses the first two charges, but not the third charge. By the way, I said surface, but on this slide, it looks more like a loop than a surface because I'm trying to depict what is supposed to be a three-dimensional surface onto a two-dimensional slide. Also, it does not matter the shape or size of the surface, as long as it is closed. So there's no way we can take Q1 or Q2 out of the enclosure without poking a hole in the surface. Except that, of course this surface is imaginary. It is a mathematical surface, so to say, rather than a physical one. In literature, this surface is referred to as Gaussian surface. The charges produce electric field, the field lines cut through the surface, and therefore, it is perfectly valid to ask what is the flux across the surface. Were we to compute the flux using the formula given in the previous slide, it would be a nightmare. Because it means, let's say we just look at the field from Q1, we need to compute how these incident field lines penetrate the surface. You can see for yourself how the strength of the field varies at different sections of the surface, depending on the radial distance from the surface. Not to mention that the field lines cut through the different sections of the surface at different angle to the surface. And that is just from one charge. Here we have three charges. This is real bad. Gauss' law, however, makes this problem real simple. The answer is simply given by the total charge enclosed by the surface, i.e. Q1 plus Q2, divided by the permittivity of the medium around the charges, which is epsilon 0, assuming the charges are in vacuum. Wow, nothing could be more straightforward than that. If we now modify the Gaussian surface in such a way that it still encloses Q1 and Q2 only, what is the flux across the surface now? Voila, it is still Q1 plus Q2 over epsilon 0. Q3, which is outside the surface, does not contribute any flux at all to the surface. But the beauty and simplicity of Gauss' law does not end here. Strictly speaking, Gauss' law is meant to compute electric flux, but it can also be used to compute electric field, provided, so this is where the catch is, the charge configuration exhibits certain symmetry. Take for instance a point charge configuration. What is the electric field at r distance away from this point charge? Well, we know the answer, 1 over 4 pi epsilon 0 times q over r square, as given by Coulomb's law. But for a moment, let's forget that we know anything about Coulomb's law. Instead, we are going to apply Gauss' law to solve this problem. Gauss' law requires us to come out with an imaginary closed surface around the charge. For a reason which will be made clear very soon, we shall draw a spherical Gaussian surface with radius r, centered at the spoken source charge. The net electric flux across this surface is then given by q over epsilon 0. In turn, flux is given by the surface area times the field perpendicular to the surface. By choosing a spherical surface centered at q, we can be sure that 1. The magnitude of the field at any points on this surface are the same as indicated by the length of the red vector arrows. And 2. The fields are pointing radially outward, and therefore, they are always perpendicular to the surface, which means, in reference to the formula of flux, theta will always be 0 degree. And since the surface area of a sphere of radius r is given by 4 pi r square, then the flux across the surface is given by E times 4 pi r square. Since we are interested in the E, we shall bring 4 pi r square to the other side of the equation and we arrive at our expected result. And that's how the factor pi appears at the denominator of the Coulomb's law equation. Notice that this works because of our choice of Gaussian surface to be spherical, centered at the source. Were we to choose some other random Gaussian surface, yes, the flux across this surface will still be given by q over epsilon 0. But we can no longer rewrite the flux in terms of E times 4 pi r square. The field along this surface is no longer uniform throughout, it is no longer always perpendicular in all regions of the surface, and for sure, the surface area is not going to be given by 4 pi r square. With Gauss' law, we can even solve problem which seems intractable initially. Remember this problem of computing the field from a uniformly charged insulating sphere? We can't solve this using Coulomb's law without resorting to integration. Now we can. What we need to do is to draw a spherical closed Gaussian surface of radius r, which shares the same center as the center of the charged sphere. The electric flux across this surface will then simply be given by q over epsilon 0. Spherical geometry exhibits symmetry in latitudinal and longitudinal rotation, as I said in the last video. This implies that the field on the Gaussian surface do not vary along latitudinal and longitudinal dimension either. It will still vary along radial dimension as it is inversely proportional to the square of the radial distance from the source. However, given a certain radius, these radial field lines will be perpendicular to the Gaussian surface and carry the same magnitude. The rest of the calculation follow exactly that of a point charge we just discussed a few minutes ago. Interestingly, as shown by the results from both cases, electric field outside an insulating uniformly distributed charge sphere behaves in the same way as that of a point charge.